They said my Uncle Ray couldn't be killed. Not by man, not by machine, not even by time. They said he was charmed, touched by fortune, blessed by the universe. But that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was, Uncle Ray made a deal with death. When I was a kid, it was his favorite story. He'd lean in close, smelling like tobacco and peppermint schnapps, and whisper, "Ever tell you about the night I beat death in a card game, Mikey?" Even if I'd heard it 100 times, I'd always shake my head and ask to hear it again. I was 20 and dumb as dirt, he'd start, just back from a little bar fight that turned a bit too real. My jaw wired shut, 3 busted ribs and a punctured lung for good measure. They stitched me up and tossed me in the back of an ambulance, but I knew I wasn't gonna make it. I felt it in my gut, you know? Cold, thick certainty. I was slipping. And then, he showed up. Death? I'd ask, wide-eyed. Death, he'd confirm, pointing a long, crooked finger to the ceiling as if death might be floating just above us, listening in. He looked like a bartender on a slow night. Rolled up sleeves, slick black hair, and a smirk that could end wars. No scythe, no robes, just a pack of cards in his hand. He took one look at me, shook his head, and said, "Raymond Joseph Crenshaw, you are due." He knew your name, knew everything. Every sin, every secret, every lie I ever told. Laid them out like cards on a table. But then I said something that made him pause. I asked if he played. You know, cards, poker. Did he? Ray's eyes would twinkle every time. He said, "I invented it." What followed, Uncle Ray claimed, was the strangest poker game ever played. In the back of an ambulance, with machines beeping and my uncle barely breathing, death dealt him a hand. 5-card draw, Ray always said. If I won, he'd let me go. If I lost, he'd take me quietly. I looked him dead in the eye, well, not dead, but you get the idea, and said, "You're on." The tale went that Uncle Ray pulled 3 kings. Death had 2 pair, 10s and 7s. A respectable hand, but not enough. Not that night. Death grinned, Ray said, and tipped his invisible hat. "One reprieve," he said. "Use it wisely." And then he was gone. I believed it for years. Who wouldn't? The man was a living contradiction. He got shot in a liquor store robbery in '76. Bullet missed his heart by less than an inch. In 1984, his fishing boat capsized in the Gulf, and he floated 3 days on a cooler lid before a Coast Guard chopper spotted him. He walked away from 2 plane crashes and survived a motel fire that burned everything but the room he was in. People called him lucky. The newspapers dubbed him the Lazarus Man. But I started thinking maybe it wasn't luck. Maybe it was something else. He never bragged, never sought attention. But sometimes, late at night after a drink or 2, he'd mutter things like, "It ain't luck keeping me here, it's debt." I didn't understand what he meant. Not until the winter of 2003. Uncle Ray was 74 when he had the stroke. It hit him hard, took his speech, half his body. He lay in the hospital for weeks, eyes glazed over, caught between this world and the next. I visited him every day. One afternoon I saw something strange. A man walked into the room. Not a doctor, not a nurse. Young, impossibly clean, dressed in black. He moved like he owned time. I didn't say anything, just sat in the corner and watched. The man leaned in and whispered something in Ray's ear. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Ray's fingers twitch. His eyes opened, barely, and then he smiled. Not long after, Ray started to improve. His speech came back, slow but sure. He walked again. He even went back to fishing, though only from the pier. I saw him, I told Ray one evening, years later. We were drinking whiskey on his back porch, cicadas buzzing in the dark. Saw who? He asked, playing dumb. The man in the hospital. Death. Ray went quiet, then he nodded. He came to collect, but he let me slide. Again. You played another hand? He shook his head. No games that time. Just a favor. I'd done something good, I guess. Maybe it wasn't my time. Maybe he was in a generous mood. He never said more, but I started to notice things. Ray didn't sleep much. He took long walks at night. Sometimes he'd stare off like he was hearing things no one else could. One time I caught him crying during a soap commercial. Ray never cried. I started to think that maybe beating death came with a price. Maybe being spared isn't a gift. It's a sentence. In 2015, Uncle Ray was diagnosed with liver cancer. He told me himself, as calm as if he were reading the weather. I've had a good run, he said. A real good one. But I can feel it now. He's close. He asked me to do something strange. I need you to find my deck, he said. Your what? My cards, the ones I used that night. I found them in a velvet pouch tucked into an old cigar box in the attic. They were worn, soft at the edges. The kings were smudged with age. The jokers looked brand new. He held the cards like they were sacred. I just want to be ready. If he shows up, I want to offer him one more hand, for old time's sake. But death didn't come with cards that time. He came as a nurse named Daniel. Quiet, kind, always humming. I didn't put it together until the third visit. Daniel had that same clean, unplaceable look, the same easy presence. One night I caught him looking at Ray like he knew him, not just as a patient, but like someone you've been waiting for. Ray passed away on a Tuesday morning. No pain, no struggle, just a soft breath and stillness. Daniel was there. He didn't say anything, just closed Ray's eyes and covered him with the sheet. As he left, he paused beside me. He went easy, he said, voice low and velvet smooth. Not many do. Why now? I asked, fighting tears. Why not all those other times? He looked at me with those deep, dark eyes. Because he was ready, and I owed him that much. Before I could say another word, he was gone. No paperwork, no goodbye, no record of any nurse named Daniel on staff. Uncle Ray's funeral was small, just family, some old friends, no reporters, no fanfare. He wouldn't have wanted it. But I kept the cards. I still have them. I take them out on bad nights when life feels thin and sharp around the edges. Sometimes I think I see Daniel on the street, in the park, on the subway. Never for long. Always gone before I can be sure. One time I saw him smile. Just once. And I swear on Uncle Ray's grave that in that smile I saw the quiet mercy of someone who doesn't come to destroy, just to relieve. Death isn't a monster. He doesn't smell like rot or roses. He doesn't shout or scowl. He smells like old cigars, fresh whiskey, and poker nights gone long. He sounds like your favorite voice in the dark. And if you're lucky, if you've earned it, he'll let you finish your story before the lights go out. When we first moved into the old farmhouse, it was the attic that unsettled me most. It wasn't the size. It was vast, with sloping beams and a single circular window, like a blind eye staring out into the overgrown fields. It wasn't even the smell. Mildew, rot, and dust don't bother me like they do Isla. No. What unsettled me was a single object in the far corner. An old, misshapen box covered with a moth-eaten cloth that looked like it hadn't been moved in decades. My wife, Isla, said it had belonged to her grandfather. "Don't touch it," she told me the day we carried up the last of the moving boxes. "He left it to me. Just leave it be." I did at first, out of respect, but that box haunted me. I would pass by the attic door and feel an itch in my teeth, a heaviness in my chest. Some nights I thought I heard it, faintly, wood shifting, cloth brushing against floorboards. Once or twice I caught Isla sneaking up there when she thought I was asleep. She always came back down hours later, silent, pale, her hands trembling. At first I thought she was grieving. Her grandfather had raised her after her parents died, and his passing had left her visibly fractured. But then came the sounds, at night, whispering. Not voices exactly, more like thoughts brushing against my own, cold and jagged and not mine. It all came to a head on a Tuesday morning. Isla left early for work, her eyes hollow and her mouth pressed into a thin line. I watched her from the kitchen window as her car disappeared down the gravel road, then turned toward the attic stairs. The door groaned when I opened it, like it hadn't been touched in years, though I knew that wasn't true. The attic was even colder than I remembered. Dust hung in the air like fog. That box, though, it stood out. The dust avoided it. Literally. The floorboards around it were clean, the air above it clear. Something inside me twisted. I pulled the cloth away. The box was made of some dark wood, warped with age. No lock, no hinges. I pushed the lid off, expecting the scent of decay or mildew. Instead, there was nothing. No smell at all. Inside were only 3 items: a knife, blunt and ornate, its handle carved with spirals that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. A book, thick and leather-bound, with pages yellowed but unmarked. When I opened it, I felt something tug at my mind. I read a few lines, names I didn't recognize, events I'd never heard of, and then, when I blinked, it was all gone. I couldn't remember a word of it. And finally, a sphere, about the size of a plum. Perfectly round, perfectly smooth, and entirely transparent, except for the color inside it. That color, it wasn't a color. It wasn't any color. It was all of them. None of them. It twisted and pulsed and moved, not within the sphere, but behind it, like it pierced through the surface of reality. When I held it in my hand, it grew warm. The world around me dulled, time slowed, and then I saw. It was a memory, but not mine. A boy in a distant land, barefoot and angry, walking away from a crumbling hut. His mother screamed for him. His father didn't look up from the dirt he tilled. The boy didn't care. He walked. He grew. He fought. He became a man, not just in strength, but in cunning. He joined raiders, then armies, then led them. He spilled blood with precision, not fury. He rose not by mercy, but by necessity. He was chosen, not by kings, not by gods, but by something older. He married power, not beauty. A discarded queen, barren, they said. He knew better. She gave him children, 2, a daughter who burned with wildness, and a son who wrote poetry instead of wielding a sword. He sought knowledge that should never be known, spells older than memory, rites that rewrote the boundaries of the soul. He traded blood for power. His army abandoned him. His people cursed him. His own daughter betrayed him. He fled, wounded and hunted, carrying what he could, the knife, the book, the sphere. His wife dead, his son murdered, his daughter a thing of horror and ambition. He bled out in a forgotten ruin, and with his last breath, he whispered something into the glass sphere, a piece of himself. When I came to, I was on the attic floor. The box was closed, the cloth replaced. My hands were shaking, but my mind buzzed with clarity. The man's name was on the tip of my tongue, but when I tried to speak it, my mouth locked shut. Isla came home that evening and found me still sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the sphere I'd brought down without realizing. "You opened it," she said. I didn't respond. "You shouldn't have." "Who was he?" I asked. Her eyes narrowed. "He's nothing. Dead." "He's not," I said. "He's awake." She lunged at me, but I was faster. Or he was. I don't know anymore. I locked the box in the basement. She begged me to destroy it. Said I didn't understand what I'd unleashed. I think she was afraid, not of me, but of what I might become. I read the book, little by little. With effort, I remembered pieces, words that wormed into the corners of my thoughts, spells, symbols. I traced them on the walls of the house, on the mirrors, which I then covered. Under the floorboards, Isla changed. Her eyes glowed faintly at night. Her hair began to lighten, as if time couldn't touch her skin. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. I think she was trying to resist him, or protect me. But it's too late. He's in me now. When I sleep, I see his life, not in dreams, but in first person. I wake with bruises I didn't get, memories I didn't make. Sometimes I don't remember what I did the night before. Sometimes I smell iron on my hands. There's something else. Our neighbor, Mrs. Halden, went missing last week. The sheriff came by, asked questions. I said I hadn't seen her, but there was dirt under my nails, and I found a ribbon in the washer, a red one. Isla stays locked in the bedroom now. She won't talk to me. She doesn't trust me. She's right not to, because I think he's winning. And the worst part, I'm starting to agree with him. He wanted more than power. He wanted freedom. Freedom from death, from time, from consequence. He wanted to be more than man, and now I want that too. Tonight I opened the box again. The knife is no longer dull. The book reads itself to me, whispering in languages I shouldn't understand, and the sphere, it's pulsing, bright and hot. I think it's ready. Isla's asleep, or pretending. Either way, this is the last night she will ever be in this house. He was betrayed by blood, by family. I will not be. I will finish what he began. Hello. No one is available to take your call. Please leave a message after the tone. Beep. Hey, Callum, sorry to hit you up after hours. I know you weren't on the schedule today, but something weird came down from dispatch. Got a call from a woman in her 80s or so. No name, just said she saw one of our units in her neighborhood last week and wants a full walkthrough of the new filtration line. She specifically asked for a tech with senior clearance, and you're the only one around here with the old license tags. I logged the address. Should show up in the system by morning. Sorry again, man. I'll make it up to you next week. I stared at my phone like it had personally betrayed me. Another weekend gone. Just one full day off would have been nice. Hell, I didn't even ask for that much. But here I was again, stuck doing a call that someone else probably should have taken. I groaned, rolled off the couch, and stretched. The TV murmured to no one as some sitcom rerun played in the background. I'd been halfway through a microwave dinner and barely conscious when the voicemail came through. Great. No dinner, no sleep, just another strange old house and probably another strange old customer. The pay for these senior-level consults was decent, though, and God knows my checking account was begging for a lifeline. By 5:15 a.m., I was in the company van. The street was still dark, painted in dull amber by lonely streetlights. I rubbed sleep from my eyes and punched the address into the onboard GPS. 1125 Chancel Hollow Lane, never heard of it. The map loaded slowly, but once it did, the route twisted through back roads and woods like the finger of something indecisive. The town was over 90 minutes away, deep in the forested countryside where the map bled into satellite views. No other appointments were on the docket today, which meant the call was probably logged as priority. Old people and their filters, I muttered as I pulled out of the city. The further I got from civilization, the more unnatural the quiet felt. Cell service dropped out about halfway there. Trees leaned closer to the road, as though curious about the van's lonely journey. When I finally rolled up to the address, my tires crunched through gravel, barely visible under thick layers of pine needles and overgrowth. The driveway was a rumor at best. The house was a relic from another era. Sagging wood, half-collapsed roof, peeling paint clinging to siding like dead skin. I half expected to see smoke coming from the chimney or a weathered man in overalls spitting into a can. But there was only silence. I parked, killed the engine, and immediately noticed something wrong. The air was thick, not with humidity. It felt heavier than that. I stepped out and swatted at something near my ear. Flies. No, gnats. Maybe both. They were everywhere. Clouds of them hovered near the tree line and drifted lazily toward me like they were waiting. I approached the porch with my gear cart in tow. The front steps creaked under my weight. I knocked on the door. Nothing. I knocked again. Louder. Still nothing. I turned, ready to head back to the van and call it, when the door creaked open behind me with the sound of hinges grinding like old bones. She was just standing there, thin as sticks, wrinkled skin the color of ash, pale blue eyes set too deep into her sockets. Her thin hair floated in the still air as if it were underwater. She didn't say anything. Hi, I said. I'm with EnviroClean. You called about a filtration consult. She blinked, slowly, then turned and shuffled inside without a word. I took that as my cue. The inside of the house was dim and smelled like damp leaves. The walls were bare, no photos, no art, just pale, cracking wallpaper and windows draped in yellowing lace. I followed her into what might have once been a living room, where a single high-backed chair sat in the center like a throne facing the fireplace. There were no lights on, just natural gloom filtering through the dust-covered windows. "Ma'am," I asked, trying not to sound too nervous, "where's the unit you wanted me to check out?" She didn't answer. She just stood by the fireplace, staring into it, as if waiting for flames that weren't there. I set down my gear. "All right, I'll just run a quick diagnostic, see what you've got set up." I turned to ask if she had any pets. Sometimes small critters could clog older models, but when I looked back, she was gone. I froze. My skin crawled. I hadn't heard her move. No footsteps, no creak of floorboards. I walked around the corner toward the hallway. Still nothing. That's when I noticed the basement door was ajar. A faint buzzing noise came from below. I couldn't tell if it was electric or insects or something else entirely. I should have left, but I didn't. The stairs creaked beneath me. The smell got stronger as I descended, something wet and metallic, like rusted water and mold. The buzzing grew louder with each step. I reached the basement and flicked on my phone's flashlight. There were no filtration units, no pipes, just walls covered in moss and streaks of green-black sludge that pulsed faintly. And in the middle of the room, kneeling on the concrete, was the old woman. She was humming. Not a song, not really. Just a series of low, guttering notes that seemed to vibrate in my teeth. Her back was to me. She rocked gently forward and back. I noticed something on her arms. Her skin wasn't just wrinkled, it was splitting. Little slits all along her forearms like tiny mouths. As she hummed, something inside those slits twitched. I dropped my flashlight. It landed with a clatter. She stopped humming. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, she turned her head to look over her shoulder. Her face was smiling, but her eyes were weeping blood, thin trails that ran down her cheeks like mascara. "Are you the new filter?" she asked, voice dry as paper. I didn't answer. I ran. The basement stairs might as well have been a mile long. I stumbled, my foot caught a step, and I slammed against the wall. But I kept moving. Behind me, the buzzing was deafening now, a chorus of wings. When I reached the top, I found the front door shut. I never heard it close. I pulled, locked. Something slapped against the window next to me, not a hand. A wing. A massive wing, translucent and wet. It fluttered like plastic wrap in a storm. I turned. The hallway was now crawling with things, small at first, beetles, centipedes. Then larger, swollen flies with milky sacs for eyes, crawling over one another in writhing masses. They came from the cracks in the walls, from the vents, from under the peeling wallpaper. I sprinted through the living room, swatting away bugs that landed on my neck and arms. My cart was overturned. Something had crushed the metal and torn through my bags. Behind me, I heard the old woman's voice echo up from the basement. "I birthed them," she crooned. I nurtured them, and now they're hungry. I smashed through the nearest window, glass slicing my arms and face. I didn't care. I hit the ground hard, rolled, and sprinted toward the van. It, too, was crawling. The inside of the windshield was coated in a wriggling black sheet of wings and legs. I didn't even try to open the door. I just ran. Through the woods, for miles, until the sun was overhead and my body couldn't take another step. I woke up in a hospital bed 3 days later. They said I was found collapsed on the side of a remote service road, covered in over 600 insect bites, dehydrated and delirious. I had no ID, no phone, just the tattered remains of my uniform. I tried to explain what happened. They gave me antipsychotics. A week passed, then another. I was discharged after they deemed me stable, but they still wouldn't let me leave without supervision. A counselor visits me every 2 days, but I haven't told her the truth. I can't, not until I'm sure. Because last night, when I scratched one of the scabs on my arm, something cracked, and inside something was moving, tiny legs, and the faintest buzz just under the skin.